Danielle, I've never said this before. Danielle, welcome to Pretty Smart.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to be meeting you and to be diving into this conversation.
Me too. Your title is Female Friendship Coach.
Yeah.
You wrote in your book that people were very skeptical of that at the beginning. Why were they skeptical?
Because it's like, is that a real job? You know, and I started off as a high school teacher, and I feel like that was met with a lot of like reverence and respect. And then I was a publicist, and then that made me feel like a badass. And so now being at parties and people are like, what do you do? And being like, oh, I'm a friendship. You know, I think people are still skeptical because we don't see friendship itself as something that commands that kind of respect.
And what did you see in high schools that you thought this was such a needed thing?
Yeah, so I taught seniors. So I have 12th graders. They're about to go into the real world. But between classes and after school, it's the number one thing they wanted to talk about. So I kind of had like a front row seat to how their issues with connection and belonging directly impacted their confidence, their attendance, their mood. And then I left the classroom and got into public relations. And I'm like, I'm working with these beautiful, high achieving, charismatic women. And it wasn't long before I found out privately, secretly, they're struggling with issues in their friendship with other women. And that's when I was like, okay, so this is a thing. And for the past 6 years, I've dedicated my career to studying what the latest research has to say about women's cooperation, communication, and conflict.
I love that you just started your own career.
Yeah.
It was born out of necessity.
Yeah, about, you know, if you Google books, at least at the time that I got into it, there weren't many friendship books that popped up. And of the ones that came up, they were mostly for children. And it's like, okay, because that's how we see friendship, that surely a child would need support. But if you're an adult, you should have it figured out.
Well, I definitely didn't. Did you have it figured out?
Oh no, I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it out.
Do you feel like, I guess it's kind of like a lot of pressure too. Like people really expect you to show up as the friend.
Yes, they do. It's funny because sometimes even on social, people will comment like, oh God, I wish I was friends with you. And I'm just like, oh God, don't let my real friends do that. Cause they'd be like, girl, let me tell you.
Right.
So I'm figuring it out too. I'm a woman out here in the world figuring it out too. But it is helpful to look at this research and stuff because it certainly informs the decisions that I make with my friends.
So you said when you came onto the scene, there weren't a ton of books.
Right.
I think there's so many books about romance.
Yes.
There's a few books, there's not very many still about friendship. What do you think that says about how we value it in society?
You know, especially for women, it's something that is a big milestone, partnership, being partnered. And even our friends, they're well-meaning, but they're like, okay, so what's the update with the guy? Are we getting closer? It's like all this pressure to move toward this accomplishment. So of course, there are going to be all these resources that emerge to support you on that journey. But I think we still see friendship as like an easy, natural, organic thing. And for women especially, we're like, oh, you're naturally communal. Like, what support do you need? Go talk to your girls. But it's complicated. We know that to be true. But if there's an assumption that it should be natural and that something's wrong with you if you can't get it right, then you're not going to see a lot of resources emerge to support us through what I would argue is probably one of the most important relationships you'll ever have.
Why do you say one of the most important relationships you'll ever have?
I mean, friendship should be at the heart of romantic relationships. So we start right there. I'm not into, you know, a guy liking me if I don't think he'd make a good friend to me, you know, because the liking fades. And so friendship should be at the heart of romantic relationships. But also, you know, for women specifically, you know, the research tells us that 70% of a woman's social network is other women. So to me, I'm like, well, then I better figure out a way to connect with other women because it's everywhere. So yeah, I think there's a lot of, we have to figure out culturally to raise friendship to the spot where it should be. But I do see things leading that way, more friendship content. So that makes me excited.
Tell me about the data. I know you're a data girl. What does it say about how our friendships impact our life, our health, our emotions?
Yeah, so I get so excited about this because a lot of times when we talk about female friendship, it's like, you know, here are some ways to, you know, go to brunch. Here are some spots. And it's like, that's all fun. But there's so much discourse around friendship as like a recreational thing that you put in the margins of your lives. And it's fun. And it is. But there's just way too much research that draws a direct line between your female friendship specifically, and your physical, mental, and emotional health. And so, you know, the first thing is that when women are stressed, one of our stress responses is to go and gather with other women. So many of us are already familiar with the concept of fight or flight, but they did that study again, this time with women, and they found that we have other responses.
We do?
We do. It's called tend or befriend. So fight or flight or tend or befriend. So when we're stressed, additional responses we might have are to go tend to those who we deem as more vulnerable and make sure they're okay, or to go and befriend and group and gather with our girls, and it decreases our cortisol. So that's probably why when you're stressed out and you call a girlfriend, you're blah, 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 afterwards, it's just like this kind of like a high, like, because that's what we do. And so for women who don't have that outlet, you might, risk not having that benefit. And then, women, they've done studies with women who are going through breast cancer, and the ones who have a strong, expansive social network tend to have better outcomes. Let me say it like that. So, I mean, there's just so many ways where having strong relationships with other women impacts other areas of your life.
I leave dinner with my friends and I feel so much happier and better about life. And so is that everyone, or that's like predominantly female?
Well, hanging out with friends, no matter who you are, is like such a mood boost, right?
Yeah.
But I think for women, it's maybe so much more satisfying because it is safe and okay for us culturally to share about our feelings, about our health. There's even research that shows that we're more likely than men to talk about mental health, work, things that are relational. So it does feel very satisfying. Whereas with men, maybe in some spaces they feel like they don't have the same freedom, or that it says okay. So maybe y'all are going and playing ball, but did you really get counsel? Did you get emotional support?
Right.
And so it looks a little bit different.
You mentioned you started as a high school teacher. Are there things that you saw girls deal with in friendship in high school that we grow out of as adults? Or do you see too often that we actually aren't growing out of those things?
I always say I think it's the same thing. I've worked with teenagers and adults, but like that fear of rejection, that fear of not belonging is the same. We might hide it differently or navigate it differently, but a lot of times when you don't want to initiate something or reach out or tell another woman like, okay, you seem really cool, I'd love to get coffee, where it feels like a social risk, that's the same. And so it's so funny because I made the foolish mistake of thinking I wouldn't have to deal with that when I was no longer a teacher. But, I learned very quickly that at every stage of womanhood, we're trying to navigate that kind of relationship.
That's interesting. Have you read Tools of Titans?
No.
Tim Ferriss, who's a podcaster, it's his book.
Yeah.
And it's an anthology. So he has like best of interviews in there. And Gabby Reese, who I think was a volleyball player, talks about going first. And when I read that part, it changed my whole life, because she says, when I walk down the street, I smile first. When I'm in a new room, I say hello first. And it's never bad to go first. I really try and emulate that. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah. I honestly, I feel like that changes the game, because we're often waiting for these cues that guarantee safety. Well, if she smiles at me first, then okay, I'm safe here. Now I'll do it back. But it's just very reactive, and we have to feel more empowered to be the authority figure and be author of our own friendship story. And so, it sounds kind of like woo-woo, but it's like, if you tell yourself, I am a connector, that's who I am, like as an identity, then you're more likely to lean into those behaviors because it's an extension of who you are, as opposed to seeing it as behaviors that you sometimes try on in a fleeting moment of confidence. It's who I am. So I'm going to text, whether you text back or not, you cross my mind. So I'm going to say, oh, I'm thinking of you. I hope you're doing okay. Because that's who I am. So I think that reframe is kind of helpful.
It really is. Interesting too, because I read in your book that in the past, you were, quote, unable to be vulnerable in your friendships. So you were nervous about being the authority. You were nervous about sharing what you really felt. What does that mean? And why is vulnerability so central to our female friendships?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure that out too, still. Like, what is that reluctance to let friends see you be weak or weird, or like to let you see me in these states, and still working through that on some things. But self-disclosure is like the glue of women's friendships. Sharing and having her share with you. It's how we establish and negotiate trust. So if you think about it, like if you're starting to lean into being friends with another woman, you're probably sharing a little more because you like her and you're trying to like start a friendship. So you're sharing to cue to her, I like you, I'm trying to bond with you. And when you're in an established friendship and there starts to be mistrust, or you're like turned off by something, you share less. And she notices that. I've seen a lot of jokes on TikTok and stuff and social media around, POV, when your friend is slowly fading you out. It's because you start to give the one-word answers. And we're like, yeah, cool. Because we share, and that's how we signal closeness. And whenever there's tension, we tend to withhold. And that's just kind of like how that barometer of our friendship state.
So now knowing that that's something that you're working on, what is your barometer? Because sometimes I'm trying to share less. I feel very open booky. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe not all my friends need to know all the things.
Yeah.
Like, what is that line?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great point because now when we think of the word vulnerability, most of us do think about self-disclosure. Like if I say you need to be vulnerable, we're like, okay, I need to share something big. But I always like to differentiate, sharing some big childhood trauma thing, that might be a level 10 of vulnerability. But the best way I've heard vulnerability defined is like taking a risk of possible rejection. So that could be with positive things too. So telling another woman like, I really like you and I would love to hang out might feel very risky to me. So that's vulnerability too. So it just means like, am I safe to make mistakes here? That's vulnerability.
That's cool.
Do I feel safe to shine here, which is a big one? Is it okay for me to tell friends like, oh my God, I got this opportunity? Or do I feel like that would make me a target? So vulnerability is I'm gonna do or say something and I feel like it could cost me. They might look at me differently or misunderstand me. So in that way, can you make yourself known and seen? It might not necessarily entail self-disclosure directly, but just being seen as not being totally put together in front of your friends.
I really like that. Level 1 through 10.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that one. Okay. Friendships and conflict.
Yeah.
The title of your book is called Fighting for Our Friendships. Why is conflict so central to your book?
Okay, so there's a lot of content on how to make friends, and I love talking about it. I do. And, we have so many life transitions that, you're always going to be having to make friends, new friends, right? But I don't see as much content on conflict. And when I do, it feels hyper situational. Like, okay, well, after this many tries, then stop calling her. Like, it's very specific. But it's like, I want to take an aerial view. What is that about? Like, why do we fight over certain things? How do we constitute a violation? It's different from the way that men do. And so I feel like we'd have more successful and satisfying friendships if we learned how to handle conflict because it's inevitable. But what's so interesting to me is that we anticipate conflict in every other context. Like I know I might get into it with my coworkers. I know I'm probably gonna get into it with my boo. Okay, we're gonna have to talk, babe, but there's something about friendship where we subscribe to the idea that it should be easy because we just have chemistry, especially if it's with another woman, like I shouldn't have to explain it. Like you're a woman. Yeah, we have like intuition, you should know. So when conflict does happen, I feel like it's the only context where it happens and we suddenly see that conflict as evidence of, oh, we're not as compatible as I thought because this is like awkward. Maybe we're not as close. And so we're ending friendships prematurely because it's like a foreign concept to push through the conflict with a friend.
So I have certain friends who, and this is always a red flag to me. They're not really my friends anymore.
Tell me.
Friends that always have conflict with other friends. Because I know it's coming my way. What is the line between healthy and unhealthy conflict?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, because we have some friends who there's always something, and it's like, can you find some kind of peace?
Yes,
like in your life at any point.
To me, that's unhappiness in yourself.
Oh, totally. Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, so I like to just define it like this. So if we're in a friendship, I'm bringing my goals, my needs, my preferences, sensitivities to the table, and you are too.
Okay.
At some point, there's going to be competing interests. At some point, something I need is something you can't give. It's going to happen. But the difference between healthy and unhealthy is, if it's healthy, we're trying to figure out how to meet this goal together. Somebody has a need we're trying to meet. Like it's constructive. So we're talking through it. We're taking space to figure it out, to think that's constructive. But as soon as it's like, I'm going to do things to maintain disconnection, what is the point? So that means the silent treatment. Because I'm upset at you. Or being punitive, women who punish. If she wants to do that, then I'm barely going to talk to her. Then what's the point?
That's not nice.
I'm roping in a third party. I'm telling a friend, but I'm not telling her like, she and I, we can't see eye to eye, like help me out here. That's different. But if it's like, do you feel like sometimes she gets shady? Because I feel like sometimes, what is the point? So when it comes to that tension, what are we doing to mend it? And if we're doing things that only deepen the disharmony, that is unproductive.
Speaking of red flags.
Yes.
So you asked your followers to weigh in with their new, this is like a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Their new friend red flags. And the answer from women was overwhelmingly the same.
Yeah.
What was it?
Her talking about other people.
Gossip.
Yeah.
No one, what Susie says of Sally says more of Susie than of Sally. No one likes a gossiper. Mm-hmm. It's bad vibes.
And we all like have our, we all have our moments, right? Like I love some good tea. Like she did what? But there's something about we just met or we're new and our conversation is you tearing down another woman. For most of us, we're taking the message of like, oh, okay, so I wouldn't be safe here. What would she be saying about me? So it doesn't do much to help move that friendship forward in a safe way.
When I'm going to keep asking you about this line because I think you walk it so beautifully. Gossip can also be bonding sometimes. Mm-hmm. Barbara Walters, who I love, everyone who listens to this knows I love Barbara. She famously was loved gossip. It's one thing I differ with her on, probably few, but what's the line between okay gossip, bonding gossip, and problematic gossip?
Yeah, so Deborah Tannen is a sociolinguist who looks at the way women speak, the way men speak, and she defines it as, are you talking about them or talking against them? And that can help you see, okay, what are we doing here? Because one of the top topics people talk about is other people, just from a sociological standpoint. And to some degree, gossip is a good thing. It came to have a negative connotation that we're just slamming this other person. But, historically the word has come to mean something negative, but it really means we're talking about a person who's not in the room. To some extent, we have to do that.
That's interesting.
Because it helps us establish norms. If I come to a new job and people are like, hey, you want to be careful of this behavior because this happened. It's showing me what's acceptable here, what's not, who's an ally, who's a foe. So at some point I need that information exchange to know. But there's a difference between we're just oh my God, isn't she awful? She is awful, right? She's bad vibes is a totally different objective,
With someone or against somebody?
Yeah, are you talking about or against?
That's really interesting. Yeah. Okay, jealousy. Friendship jealousy. You say sometimes it can be beneficial. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. Can you please tell me what you mean?
Yeah, okay, so as I've learned it, the difference between jealousy and envy, we'll start there. So envy requires two people and jealousy involves three. Okay. So envy is, I want something you have. I wish that was mine, envy. But jealousy means I'm scared that something I have is going to be taken away. So if we're tight friends and a new girl comes and you keep talking about how amazing your new coworker is, eventually we'll be like, okay, okay, that's enough. Because I'm jealous over you. I'm jealous that she might take what I already have. Envy is, I want what you have, right? But jealousy could be a good thing in terms of it tends to activate friend-keeping behaviors. So it might make me step up and do the things I need to keep our closeness because I feel whoa, this might get taken from me. So now I step up. It can be constructive in that way. But in terms of friendship envy, kind of oh, I'm jealous of you. I think it could be helpful in terms of directing me toward the things that I want and desire in my life. Mm-hmm. But as soon as it turns into I'm saying things to humble you because I think you're getting a little too, or I'm trying to sabotage and get in the way of you achieving certain things, or I'm trying to tear you down either verbally or mentally so I feel better, right? So if you get a new apartment and my brain is thinking oh, how does she get that? She doesn't even That's where it would be a problem.
It's a huge problem.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel you cannot have people around you that don't want the best for you. Mm-hmm. I know it's a little evil eye, but
yeah, no,
that's
I totally
a quality that I really don't have time for.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's hard because we always say, I want friendships where I can relax, me, myself. But as soon as you feel you're always on guard.
Yes.
And now I'm measuring what I say and what I share because I don't want her to make a little passive aggressive remark, or I don't want her to think that I think I'm all that. It's a lot of mental labor, and safety is fundamental in a friendship. And so if that's not there, come on.
I didn't realize that safety was such a big deal because safety is so core of any, it's the core of any relationship. So obviously it would be, but I didn't even think about that. This next question could be maybe my biggest question of the whole interview.
Okay, yes.
Friendship expectations. Mm-hmm. So women have friendship expectations that I don't see the traditional man having. Mm-hmm. For instance, birthdays, bachelorette parties, baby showers, celebrations of any kind. We are expected to show up and show out in ways that men are just not socially, the norm, right? I feel like I hear often that these celebrations, particularly weddings, are big sources of conflict. I want to kind of go through some of them with you, but overarchingly, why do you think that women expect more out of friendships than men?
You know, it's interesting because the research finds that women have higher expectations of their close relationships in general. So if you're a close relationship in my life, I expect a lot out of you, whether it's romantic or platonic. Our expectations are just higher in general than men's. And I mean, there's so many reasons for that. I think that for a woman to woman friendship, it might be what we said earlier about like, I expect that since you're a woman, I expect you to be able to read what I need, read my subtext and micro expressions, anticipate my needs. I shouldn't have to articulate them. And I hear oftentimes women say to me, I mean, I should not have to say that. Like Danielle, like she should know. Like, it's just like crazy to us that I'd have to explain myself because you should know you're walking my exact same shoes. And so I think that right there starts to create a little bit of a dissatisfaction.
Is the flip side of that if we expect more, do we also get more out of our friendships?
I don't think it's if you expect more, you get more. I think it's if you communicate more, you get more. Because I think the dissatisfaction we experience is compounded by the fact that we feel like we shouldn't have to say it. But I mean, you're never going to transcend a level of closeness that means you won't have to communicate anymore. I still have to tell my friends, you know, not demands, but like, hey, I think this year I want to do it big for my birthday. I never do. And this year that would be really important to me. I still have to say that. I can't do the whole, I mean, it's my birthday. Do I really have to spell that out? It's just, I mean, you could hold on to that if you want to, but essentially your friends never really know, like, are we low key? Are we not? Are we?
Right. You have to communicate where you're at. Now, what happens if the expectations are mismatched with what people are willing to give or show up as? So, for instance, bachelorette parties. I'm going to personalize this.
Yes, hypothetically.
I hate bachelorette parties. And I know that's like similar to admitting that you don't like dogs, so I'm scared to admit this.
Dangerous territory.
Very dangerous.
No, I get you, but tell me why. What is it that has you just so turned off by them?
Okay. I travel a lot for work and personally. So to carve out travel for a specific bachelorette feels like a lot for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like I'm getting a lot out of the experience, which I know is selfish. But like, I don't like a lot of the common activities. If you're inviting me to a spa, I'll get on a plane. If you're inviting me to wear a penis hat and go out till 3 a.m., I'm not in. But I'm totally cool if that's your vibe. I just don't want to be there, and I'd love to show up for you in a different way. I actually don't know if I'm navigating this well. What would you say to someone like me?
Let me ask you, how do you say no? Like when you get that invitation, you see the itinerary, how do you manage that?
Okay, so one of my really close friends, I actually went because I knew it was really important to her. And I was like, sometimes you need to give in relationship. But for friends that I know don't care as much about a bachelorette, I'm like, listen, this is really tough for me with travel and financially. I don't want to upset you. If it's very important to you that I'm there, I will show up. I'd rather show up for you in a different way, like if we can go to dinner separately and celebrate, et cetera. And they're usually like, I don't give, you know? And some of my friends even have said to me, with the invitation, I know they know me enough to say, I know this isn't your thing, but you're obviously invited, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, bachelorettes can be tricky. I think it's because it feels like, okay, I only get one of these. And so, you know, from the perspective of the bride, I only get one of these. This is my time. I've been looking at examples of this for like 30 years. This is my turn, and like such grand expectations. But I was once talking to this therapist who specializes in helping women during their wedding season because Kara, the bridal coach, shout out to her. But she was saying, and it was like such brilliant advice. She said that sometimes a bride is so fixated on the vision, she loses sight of the relationships. And you were trying to fit those relationships into the vision. And you're going to have to do some soul searching. Really, you're considering ending a friendship because you have a friend who can't make it, can't afford it, doesn't want to do certain activities that she feels like are compromising for her. Now you're questioning the entire relationship. And I get being disappointed, I get having the picture of all my favorite girls in one spot celebrating me at the same time. It's very romantic. It's very fun idea. But, you know, you're going to have to call into question like, okay, what evidence has this woman given me over the course of our friendship that she's supportive, attentive, down for me? Okay, if this is inconsistent with everything else she's done, I'm gonna have to just be bummed and move on. But I'm sorry, I see too many of these conversations on social that are like, well, if she doesn't X, Y, Z, she's not a real friend. And that list is just getting really long and really specific. And at the end of the day, whether it's wedding, bridal party, whatever, just the context of the history of our friendship outweigh this moment where I really want something and she can't make it. I mean, a little nuance, you know?
Well, also it feels like in this day and age, the celebration has gotten really large. Like it's one thing if you're asking everyone in that city to come to dinner one night versus like travel to New Orleans and meet me there for 3 days and take off a day of work and buy, you know, like it's just a lot, I think.
Yeah. I think for the woman in that role, like look at how many barriers are erected during your ask. So if it's commute, time off, money, I mean, like you have to really think through those things because they're costs. They're financial, whatever. I'm away from my babies for 3 days. What are all the costs that are required of friends to show up for you? And that's something you got to be kind of practical.
I love the part of your book where you talk about weddings. It's like everyone needs to read the book because I savored it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for saying that.
It is, I mean it to my core. It is so freaking great and fun to read.
Oh, good. Okay.
It really made me think. One, I want everyone to read the wedding section, but the one thing that stood out to me was you said a lot of friendships end around that time. Why is that?
You know, it makes me kind of like annoyed when people dismiss wedding stuff as like, oh gosh, here we go with the drama. And it's like, well, yeah, because this is the one time in your life you're expected to put your friendships on display. And to rank them. So maybe my whole life I've been thinking I'm like your number one girl. And when you choose somebody else to be the maid of honor, you've got me questioning everything. And I mean, this is client after client I've had these conversations with. We're talking like reasonable women who are like, she didn't choose me and I don't know if I want to continue the friendship. And I don't think it's petty because they're calling into question, wait a second, have I been a fool? I've been thinking we're super tight. And for you to select this other person makes me question my place in your life. And the research does show that mutual prioritization is very important for women. So if I'm your number 2 girl, I like to feel like, you're my number 2 girl. It makes me feel good.
Yes.
And so as soon as you discover that you're like number 4, but you've been thinking you're number 1, you're trying to kind of gauge what that means. And it's really hard.
Do you think wedding parties should be abolished?
I can't tell a woman what to do. I will say I am happy to see women leaning into saying, you know what, I'm not going to have a bridal party. I'm just going to skip it. I'm seeing them do that more, and I am hearing them report a certain level of joy and freedom in making that decision.
So speaking of this bridal party stuff, you cite a study in your book that says that only half of friendships are reciprocal, which I was actually very shocked by that. How do you not get your feelings hurt by a friend that's not reciprocal or doesn't rank us as high as you rank them?
I don't know how you not get your feelings hurt because you will get your feelings hurt. And I will say, it's a relatively small study, but I will say it matches stories women have shared with me. I'm seeing it reflected in real life. And I mean, just when we think about it, it can be hurtful when we discover this, but your friends' lives have been constructed in such a way over the course of their lifetime that perhaps you're like their number 4 girl. And I'm saying these numbers very arbitrarily, but perhaps you don't rank as high in her life as you rank her in your life because of how her life's been designed. You have to ask yourself, is it worth me letting it go? Because I discovered she doesn't hold me as close as I hold her. Now, we're not saying the respect looks at, you should feel respect, I feel safe with you. But if I realize my girl is like kind of has another bestie and it looks like they might be closer than she is with me, I could see that being kind of hurtful, but you have to step back and ask yourself, hold on, if I call her, does she show up? Does she have my back? Do we laugh when we're together? If I need something, she's there. Does she teach me new things? If all of that's in place, I don't know. I've just found more joy in my friendships being able to do that. If I sense that a friend's kind of close with somebody else and it's like, oh, if when we're together, and we can all party and have a good time, can I find a way to not get distracted by the closeness Olympics and instead be able to enjoy what we do have?
Tell me if you find this too in your friendships. I find a lot of things change seasonally. So like, you know, if I'm in the same sort of time of life as my friend, for instance, like I don't have kids yet. My friends that have kids, I see them getting a little closer because they're bonding over different things. And my friends that are single, we're bonding. And it kind of ebbs and flows. And you don't want to just throw away those friendships because you're in a different season.
I believe that women's lives change more rapidly and drastically than men's lives through the life cycle, for a lot of different reasons. But because of that, I think that there are those transitional periods that make us kind of think like, wait, I can't relate to you anymore. What's happening? Everything feels so different and new. And, you know, in those times we have to ask ourselves, like give ourselves a little bit of grace because we've never had practice being friends this way. You know, so I think a lot of us go to like, oh my God, it's happening. Like, I can't relate to her. She's not showing up for me. Well, she's never had a friend with a baby before. So she doesn't really know, like, what do I do here? What do I even ask about? Maybe she doesn't want to dedicate the brain cells to asking about the differences between diaper cream. You know what I'm saying? So I have to be like, okay, she's not going to be as invested in this conversation as I am because it's not her world, but she still demonstrates interest, but she can't relate. And what I found is that if you guys can find a way to figure out, okay, how do we want to be friends in this new stage? I mean, in talking about it the way you would in a romantic relationship. Again, if you sense something changing with your man, you're gonna be like, okay, babe, what's happening with us? I don't feel connected. What's going on? With the friend, we're like, oh, I guess this is it. Or we're like trying to read subtext in her text, like, okay, well, she's been acting. We're trying to decode. Same thing. Hey, I feel like since I've had a baby, like you and I feel off. I miss you. And I know things are weird, but like, I'm trying to figure out how we can still like stay strong, you know? Like, why can't we normalize doing that with a friend to help her feel called in, to help her feel you're top of mind for me. I'm acknowledging the change. So it's not like a secret we keep dancing around. It feels weird, right? What are we going to do to stay connected? And the last thing I'll say is something I found to take the pressure off of my friends being able to keep up with my changing lifestyle is having community to supplement those relationships. So if I'm a new mom and I find myself growing increasingly frustrated that my friends don't get it, maybe I need to be in a mommy group where I can geek out on mommy stuff and I feel seen, I feel affirmed in that very specific way. And now I find myself releasing friends from the expectation to have this knowledge and investment. You know, so as long as they're demonstrating care and affirming that identity, like I recognize your mom, then can I find a way to just manage expectations?
That is so proactive and awesome. I love that idea. Like, go search for what you're looking for instead of putting all of the expectations on one person.
Correct.
That's fabulous. Because we don't do that in romantic relationships either, right? Like, if you're dating someone who doesn't like golf, you're not like gonna necessarily make them golf.
Right.
You say we are only trying to answer the same two questions when it comes to friendships. What are they?
So we're trying to ask, you know, can I love fully here? And who is going to love me fully? Like, I want to love and I want to be loved. And, you know, we get into the details, which are important because we need to know the day-to-day business of friendship. But essentially, you're only asking those two questions ever. If it's a question about like texting and she doesn't text me as much as or she didn't show up for my thing, and you're really asking about, does she love me as much as I love her? You know, does she love me? Am I over-invested in this? I mean, really, it's always strips down to trying to answer those two questions. And I feel like keeping that in mind will help us when there is conflict, because we get caught in those details. Essentially, you're trying to be reassured. She cares as much as I do. And I am safe to love freely here. It's always that. And I feel like it's just something to cling to when you find yourself losing sight of like, okay, well, she was late 2 times, but you know, or she didn't respond to my story, but she is like active on social, but she didn't respond. When we get into that, it's really because you're starting to be suspicious that she doesn't love you as much as you love her, or that your love's being taken for granted. It's the same two things. And so I would just advise any woman who's feeling caught up in the ups and downs of this week's scenario, if you got honest with yourself, is it really about those two things? And then what can you do to go and get some security for those two questions?
I love how no matter what I come at you with, you have a zoomed out perspective of what this relationship is. And it really gives people so much grace.
Oh, I'm so glad. And you know what, honestly, I think it's because, like, keeping it real, I've been on both sides. Like, you know, and I think the feedback that I hear from people that I really appreciate the most is when people say, like, gosh, you're never really vilifying one person or the other. And I don't want to be the girl who's like, I mean, I see both sides. But essentially, like, yes, I've been the friend who's disappointed people. I've been the friend who's been disappointed. It's just too easy to vilify the girl who didn't show up to the thing, or who doesn't text back, or who canceled plans with you to go with her man. Like, that's annoying, but it's too easy to be like, fake friend. Yeah. She's a fake friend. She's a person who's going to make choices to disappoint you. And you're going to have to figure out, okay, is this happening so frequently that I don't feel safe here? But as far as she's fake, so I'm done with her, it's just too easy and it's reductive.
When I was growing up, I had really high expectations of friends because I was always like 10 going on 35. Like, I feel like I'm 33 and like I'm finally at the level with all my friends. Like, we all have the same expectations now. But when I was younger, I wanted them to be loyal, and I had very high expectations. And my dad would always be like, Danielle, different friends for different reasons. And I could never get it because I wanted somebody to be all the things. I've grown up to realize different friends for different reasons is a really great mantra. Yeah. When do you know when it is time to release a friend? How do you know if I have a hard time, I think all women do, throwing away friendships, especially if there's history there. When do you know it is time to let go?
Sometimes there are the egregious, obvious ones that we know of. If a person's constantly lying, you know, things like that. So it goes back to that trust and safety that we talked about. If a friend is talking about you, like, I'm nice with you, but then I'm saying things to tear you down. So we know some of the obvious ones, right? She does something so explicitly hurtful. You're like, we can't keep doing this. I think the ones that feel a little more tender and gray are, okay, I do love her, but I also feel like I don't have the energy to put into it anymore. And I think the main driving force of this friendship is the history. You know, so it becomes like an obligatory friendship. Like, oh, she's been here 20 years. I mean, it would be messed up. Even though I find myself not relating to her, not caring to call to get the life updates anymore. I just am kind of like, meh. I think those are harder to figure out. And honestly, I think the first sign that like maybe it should end is if you're constantly wondering if you should end it.
Yeah.
Might be one sign, you know? And then also making sure it's not a matter of, you know, she held you accountable for something, or you guys are facing conflict. So being able to differentiate, is this whole thing coming to a close? Or am I uncomfortable with this weird season we're in of having some tension over this thing? You have to be able to tell the difference. But I know that it's really hard when women do arrive to the conclusion of like, I think this is done, and knowing how to articulate that, because it feels risky.
I was debating whether I was going to ask you this or not on camera, but I'm going to go for it. I had a friend that I've been friends with since I was like 10 years old who did an egregious thing. My boyfriend, like in 2017, broke up with me, and we were still living together. And one night he didn't come home. And I was beside myself. I was like Carrie in Sex and the City, like going through Berger's whole apartment. I was looking at everything, couldn't find anything. He wouldn't answer my calls. And this friend is always up early. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna drive to her house. It's like 6 blocks away because it's early and I need to like climb in bed with her and just like, I can't be alone. I'm freaking out.
You have me on the edge of my seat right now.
So I drive to her apartment, and she has 2 windows beside her door. And I knock on the door, no answer. So I look through the window, and they're on the couch. They're not touching, but they're on the couch together, and neither of them had been answering my calls.
Oh my God.
So I was heartbroken for a lot of reasons, right?
Yeah.
I was actually more heartbroken by her than him, because, right? I had no... At that point, I didn't have as many expectations from him or with him. She and I are still friends. I love her deeply. I do not trust her the same way. And all of my other friends cannot believe that we are still friends. It was not a relationship I was willing to let go of. I still hold on to it a little bit. In your expert opinion, what do you think?
Wow. Okay. I'll say this.
You see that, you hear the ambulance. Yeah. I feel like it was on cue.
Out, please. Yeah.
A friendship emergency.
Yeah. So I get a lot of messages that are like essay style. Should I end it or not? And I know this might not be satisfying, but I always say, like, girl, at the end of the day, I'm not here to qualify your friendships. I see my role as offering things for you to consider as you make that decision, but to be like, yeah, based on everything you said, ends that. You know what I'm saying? But if you have determined, hey, that was a weird moment, we talked about it, something I'm not sure, but when I look at what value this offers me and the discomfort or whatever damage that was done, and I weigh them out, it, for me, offers more value than it does pain or disappointment. That is for you to decide. And if there was discomfort and it was disruptive and you all are finding or have found ways to kind of repair or mend, that's your business. You know, even if your friends who love you are like, let that go. If you have determined it offers more value than pain or disappointment or discomfort, then that is for you to decide. And if you both are showing up intentionally pouring into it to grow, to repair whatever ruptures emerged, that is for you two to decide.
Yeah, I felt like it was not of her character, so I was okay. But I appreciate that perspective. I really like that.
Yeah, and I hear that because, you know, I've been through something, and I shared a story in the book that I like deleted and put back in and deleted and put back in because I was like, okay, I like to look like I have it together, where I made choices.
I don't want to give it up.
Yeah, that friends were like, that's not cool, and was embarrassed, was like mortified. And so that's why I say I can see both sides. But what I love is what you just said of like, it was so not her that I was like, okay, when I look at things whole picture, it's something I still want to fight for. And so I respect that.
Fighting for friendship.
Yeah, there you go.
What are behaviors to adopt to become a better friend? I saw in one of your TikToks, you say we should work on expressing platonic desire more.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean, platonic desire? What does that look like?
So we all want to feel desired. Like even platonically, I want to know that my friends are somewhere like, man, I miss Danielle. Like, it feels good, right? Yeah. But I think I often say, like, even the word romance, if you look up the definition, it says something about, like, you know, to delight and like curiosity. So to some extent, how can you have a little romance in your friendships? I'm thinking of you. You look so pretty in this picture. I'm taking you out tomorrow. Like, you know, in a safe and appropriate way, but how can I give myself permission to actively express how much I want you in my life, how much I appreciate you, instead of doing things like, oh my God, like, you should know. We've been friends for so long, you should know. Yeah.
It is so fun to spoil your girlfriends and to feel spoiled by your girlfriends.
I agree.
There's something about that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for ambitious people? I feel like my ambitious friends all talk about this issue. They care so deeply about their friendships because they are ambitious about friendship. And they are also overwhelmed by what is required to be a great friend and build whatever it is they're doing.
So I hear you saying for women who are like either managers or entrepreneurs, like high achieving women and friendship, how do they kind of like balance that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be also for people who are moms, right? Like that's a really exhausting role. Sure. How do you balance, you know, like when you are an overworked, underpaid person, which so many of us are, how do you balance friendship and everything you have going on? Yeah, okay, that's such a great question because I know so many of us feel that way. Like, I want to be a good friend, but I don't know if I have it in me. The first thing I'll say is burnout is real, where we feel so overwhelmed with the volume of demand in our lives that we feel like we don't have it to give. So I want to start there because I know women have that heart. I want to show up, but I don't think I even can. And I want to validate that. I will also say I think it's helpful to reframe what you think a good friend is. Because if for you it is a lot of gestures and a lot of going out and a lot of, then you are going to say, okay, I don't think I have all that to give. And I like to think that a lot of us can increase being a good friend by just like 1 degree by being active on the things you already think about. Because a lot of us, we do think about our friends often, or we see something and comes to mind. I think being active on the things you already do would be a big, like a huge step and require
less lift. So for example, if I'm in Target and I see something and it reminds me of her, like to snap a picture and send it. I mean, like really on the spot, but for the person receiving it, it's such like a, oh, like.
You don't even have to buy it for them. Just snap a photo. I love that.
I mean, really, that's it. Because again, it goes to those questions of like, do you care about me? So to know that today I crossed your mind, or to like activate a memory, which nostalgia is really powerful and bonds people. So even to snap a picture of a mug and be like, oh my God, this reminds me of spring break 2002. I can be like, oh my God, I know. So, but just that moment, like it's a reminder of like me and you alone in this vault, right? Like our private little bubble. And so those things activate it. And then if you do feel like you're coming into a season where you're overwhelmed, to even front load it. Like I care enough to tell you I'm going to be out of commission for a while. So to even say like, I'm starting to feel really overwhelmed with all the mom stuff. And I just want you to know, like, even if I'm not texting you, I'm thinking of you. And if you guys go out and I can't make it, like I want to be there. I just need you to know that. I mean, that right there is like okay, you care about me.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even if you don't have it to give, I think telling friends, I want to be there for you. It's important to me to show up for you. Those conversations help people to feel safe, seen, and supported. It's not all the little like Venmo her $20 for coffee and sometimes send her flower. Like it's those are really cute gestures, but also it's the simple things. It's asking about an update she shared with you last week.
Yeah.
That is a big one. I hear that often from women is like, I don't know, I feel like she doesn't care. Like she didn't even ask me about it. I told her about XYZ. She hasn't even asked since. I mean, literally being like unprompted. Hey, you mentioned that thing with your dad last week. Everything good? Just that. It shows me you were attentive. You care enough to ask, you're invested in my life. Yeah. So rethink what being a good friend means and how much activity, hours, and money is associated with the image that comes to your mind. And can you do a little rethinking of what it looks like to show up?
One of the things that I love, or that at least resonates with me, what I'm hearing you say, is to say the things that are unsaid.
Yeah.
That is really powerful.
Yeah, but we've got to have the permission because we do it in every other place. And it feels weird, or women are like, okay, does that look thirsty? Or it feels vulnerable because if you don't know if she feels the same way, does it feel very vulnerable to like lean into looking in her eyes and being like, but I mean, I know I appreciate it when friends are like, hey, thank you so much for yesterday. It's just like, I feel so connected to them.
That is so beautiful. Okay, meeting new friends after school, whether it's high school, college. This is a question that I get most often.
Oh.
I'm always like, join a group, join a volleyball team. I hate volleyball, I don't know. But like, you have great advice on this. What should people do when they are adults and trying to make friends?
That is definitely the number one question I get. And I get it. But I'll say it typically comes with some kind of qualifier. So people want to know, how do I make friends after college, in a new city, as a new mom, as a divorcee? And I hope that it shows us that we will always be having to make new friends. So we better figure it out. And I like to lean into that because a lot of women feel shame that they're even in that position. Oh, I should already have my friend group. I'm 35. Stop it. And the research tells us that we replace about half of our friends every 7 years, which says to me that we should expect some level of pruning, like a natural process of people coming out and then the churn, bringing new people in. So we better figure out how to make them, because it's going to keep happening. When your husband dies and your kids get out the house, I mean, like, you're going to have to start over. So so there are 3 things I can give.
I love that
you're like dark. I'm like, no, when your husband dies, you're like, oh my God, I need new friends.
But obviously we'll outlive them. That's what it's saying.
Because obviously he won't be here long. So you're going to need to know. But yeah, okay, so I can give you 3 things, right?
Okay.
So the first I would say is to get comfortable leveraging technology. And I feel like Gen Z is like very open to this. And the rest of us are like, I don't know. It doesn't make you desperate. It makes you very resourceful. And so apps like Bumble for Friends, I know, is very popular. And if you have unconventional work hours, if you are in a new city and you're looking for like, where's the diversity at, or whatever it is, I can go into this place, show what I'm looking for in this particular, vicinity, and find my people. So it kind of expedites the process of finding your people. The one thing I'll say with that is you need to get into real life as soon as possible. So this whole, we're DMing for 3 months, we're not doing that, okay? It looks like we click, she has good rapport, let's meet in real life. The second thing I would say is to become more regular somewhere. So a lot of us like romanticize how things used to be when we were in school and it was so much easier. It's because we were clocking hours together. And because I saw your face all the time, you're the option. So let's sit together at lunch, you know? And it also lends itself to something known as the mere exposure effect. And the idea is that we tend to prefer people just because they're familiar. So if I see a familiar face and a totally new face, I'm gonna lean to the one I've kind of seen before. So how can you make that work in your favor? Can I work from the same coffee shop every Friday at 9? Can I walk my dog in the same area every day, you know, being mindful of safety and things? But those things make you irregular and it feels less intimidating to be like, hey, what's up? Because I see your face all the time.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is leverage the support of super connectors. So you probably are one. I know I'm one. Like we're those girls who are like, oh my God, you should meet my friend so-and-so. That person, even if you two aren't close, but you probably know that girl, right? That girl. And so it's just like, how can you ask her, you know, send a message that says something like, I'm looking to get more plugged in and I thought of you because you're always out and about and doing something interesting. So I thought I would ask, do you know of any events around town that you think are worth checking out or any groups I should like get involved in? And the average person is happy to help. Like that's flattering. You thought I could help you. And best case scenario, you even get an invitation to be a +1. So they might say, oh yeah, oh my God, I'm in a book club. You should come. But you can't expect to get the need met if you will not make the need known.
It's really, really well said. So good. Okay, last question. You outline a specific type of friend that people are going to encounter. I want a rundown of these archetypes. The first is the flaky friend. Who's she? She sounds annoying.
Well, I know because I've been her. No, the girl who you can't really rely on her. So if she says, I'll be there at 10, or if she says, okay, I'll send you that link, or okay, and there's a party that's like, she's probably not going to. And some people see it's quirky and they're like, I'm not bothered by it. But others are very bothered by it because it feels like she doesn't care. It feels disrespectful of her time, of your time. And so it's something you have to negotiate because sometimes, again, we'll be like, oh, well, she bailed on lunch. So I don't know, I'm just done with her. Have I ever said, girl, I love spending time with you. And when you cancel, like it messes up the rest of my day. Like I carved out time to make this happen. You know, you can negotiate. But if she hears that and is still like, well, I'm sorry, like that's just
who I am,
then you would have to figure out if that's something you can work with.
The clingy friend.
Yes.
Who's she?
The clingy friend, we all know that friend. You know, she wants more than you can give, it feels. It feels like the scales are imbalanced. You might experience this as a lot of text messages, a lot of bids for attention, more than you, like faster than you can keep up with. She may express, you know, jealousy over seeing you hang out with other girls instead of her, things like that. They make you feel a little suffocated and overwhelmed. You know, I know people are very familiar with attachment styles. It's either that you're experiencing her as clingy because she is very anxious and eager, or because you're avoidant. So it feels clingy to you because you only want to talk like once every 3 months. And she's like, can I talk to you like once a week? You know, so again, negotiating is the key. So how can I tell her, you know, not that she's too much, because we want to be careful about causing other women complexes and damaging them in the process. So I'm going to be careful over you. I'm not going to tell you you're too much, but I might say, hey, I prefer to catch up on weekends, so I'm probably not going to be good with like the daily text messages.
Right.
What day works for you? Like a Saturday or Sunday?
So you want to communicate your own limitations.
Correct. Instead of like you just do too much. Or like, it's like a little too much for me. You know, it gives people like, so to say like, hey, I'm a little more low key with check-ins. They're not as frequent for me. That's like kind of like my sweet spot. So do you just want to meet up, you know, every other weekends? You know, or if she sees you with other friends and is like, oh, I thought you were busy, but you're yeah, no, when I say I'm busy, I mean like, you know, it's important to me that I see all my friends and I'm trying to rotate everybody in and spend family time. And so that probably won't let us do like back-to-back weekends. But I definitely want to see that movie with you that we were talking about. Oh my God, can we please go next month? Because I can't wait to see it with you.
You know, there's a term that someone taught me called light and bright.
Ooh.
And I try and harness that, and you do it so much because what you're saying is like, say it all with a positive spin.
Yeah.
Like just say, that movie, I really want to see that with you.
Yeah.
You know, light and bright.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, the last one is the negative friend.
Yes.
Who's she?
Some of us know her very well, right? And it can come in different forms. Negative in terms of, okay, everything sucks in my life all the time. It can be negative in terms of being really critical of your choices. She always has something to say and you didn't ask. And she's telling you like how it doesn't measure up. So that negativity we can experience in a lot of different ways. This is so tricky because one of the reasons we value our friendships so much is because we do have a space to be like, oh my God, the world, the patriarchy. And you have somebody who's like, oh my God, I know. And one of the benefits of friendship is I have somebody to take my troubles to. The thing though, is that if we expect that your friend should be your therapist, I know some people say she is my therapist, I get it, but they're not though. And I can help you through some things, but you cannot expect me to have the skills and availability of a therapist. It's not fair to me. I'm your friend, not your counselor. And so we have to manage that. And then finally, I'll say, you know, the Gottmans who are like relationship OGs, you know, they often say that successful relationships have a positivity to negativity ratio of 5-1. So for every negative interaction, you need like 5 positives to override it just because of how much we weigh negative interactions. So if you took if you got in a helicopter and looked out, you know, over your friendship landscape, how many of the last 10 interactions were negative? That's all I'm saying.
I was just thinking about that with a friend. I was like, I'm always drained when I leave this phone call. And I was like, at first I thought, well, I think I'm providing more value than I'm getting in this relationship. But I don't really like looking at friendships that way. And I think what I really felt was the 5-1.
Yeah.
So I like that.
At some point, yeah, like we're here because it is a totally elective relationship at the end of the day. You're not a person I signed a government contract to marry. You're not my child. Like I'm choosing to be here. So yes, use me when you need me, you know, for something hard and to go through hardship with you. But it's got to have some degree of fun and pleasure and lightness. That's why we're friends. You know, it brings joy and pleasure to my life as well. And so it's just easy. It's really easy to kind of co-ruminate and to talk about our boss sucks. Like if we're work besties. Yeah, but at some point somebody needs to say, okay, let's give ourselves 10 minutes and then like, let's go get ice cream because I'm so over talking about it. You know, it's not dismissive. It's sometimes
light
necessary.
and bright.
Yeah, it's light and bright. That's right.
Okay, rapid fire, Danielle. What is your favorite activity to do solo?
Read.
Love that. You were meant to be on this podcast. Your favorite activity to do with friends?
Sit on the back patio and run our mouths. We don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to like give a big tip to servers. We could just like sit, run our mouths in a low key space. And that's just like, that's my favorite thing.
Me too.
Yeah.
I want to be on someone's couch.
Yes.
Love that. You're in Florida, so you could be on a back patio.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, a routine habit that keeps you sane.
Journal in the mornings. I know that's not like revolutionary, but it does work for me. It works to wake up, to pray, to spend some alone time, and to just kind of get those first thoughts out has been really helpful.
Your book dedication. I'm obsessed with book dedications. I feel like this is your first book. There's a lot of like, who and what do I dedicate this to? How did you come up with yours?
Yeah, so mine was, you know, to all the girls I've loved before, because the book is about fighting for it when you have something good. And I know that there are friendships that I ended prematurely because I didn't know better or because I was stubborn or unequipped to like have hard conversations. And so sometimes, I have thought about them in terms of like the one that got away friendship wise. And so this book is everything that I've learned and just kind of like my dedication to the girls that could have maybe still been in my life if I knew better.
Why'd you get emotional when you said that? Did you think about someone in particular?
Yeah. I think I have to do the work in my brain to say, you know what, I learned lessons from it and I can grow and apply that moving forward. And I do think I have current friends who would say, Danielle's a good friend, but it's because I've been a bad one. So of course I'm learning and now I'm like, okay, I got this. But it's because I've been stubborn or I've been a chameleon or I've been too sassy, too hard, too cold. I've been all those things. And so sometimes I feel like it's kind of like the ghost of Christmas past when you're like, or ghost of Christmas future. So I feel like I'm telling women like, trust me, if you continue to be hard or cold or you don't get your self-esteem together, and so you tolerate mistreatment. All those things are going to cost you healthy, satisfying friendships. And so at the heart of all of this is like doing the own self-work so that you can be in good relationships. And I'm glad that I'm figuring it out. But it has cost me some along the way.
As somebody who had a hard time with vulnerability in the past, thank you for sharing that and for being so vulnerable. I thought your whole book was very vulnerable. Not just your own stories, but how you wrote it, because I feel emotional now. Every girl that reads this book will take a look in the mirror and think about all the girls that they've loved before.
Yeah.
And all the girls they will still love in the future. And
That's right.
Friendships are really tricky and beautiful and all of the things. And I just think you're going to help a lot of people with this book.
Oh, I appreciate you so much. That's my, that is my prayer always, is that for the woman who's holding it, you know, I can't say that this will be the book that solves all your problems, but I really do hope that it helps you confront some things, and it helps you to more freely love other women, and that it brings healing to women who need, you know, some encouragement. So that's the prayer always.
Okay, my last 3 questions that I ask everybody. A book you read that changed your life, something you think everybody should read.
There is a book called The Relationship Principles of Jesus. And it's just nice to see these portraits of, okay, how did he talk to people? How did he forgive? How did he share truth? And it is definitely life-changing. I'll also say the book Platonic by Dr. Marissa Franco is like crazy awesome. And I think everybody should read it.
I'm going to give you these 52 questions. If you can pick one randomly.
Oh, gosh. Okay, I knew this was coming. Okay, this one says, what do you want to be known for?
Oh, okay. I like that one for you.
Very on brand. I would say I want to be known for helping people see friendship differently. I think that's my most flattering compliment, is when people say like, wow, I never thought about it that way. That makes me feel really good. So I hope to bring that experience to women through the book.
Danielle, what's the smartest decision you've ever made?
Having children, which was a very conscious choice. Do we want to do this? And it's brought a lot of joy to my life, and I'm so glad we made that decision.
When did you do it for the first time?
I think I was like 31 at the time, so my children are now 5 and 2. And it's just really cool, and I'm unlearning a lot of things through them, that they are their own people and they have their own personalities and interests. And I'm just learning a lot by watching them every day. So I'm really glad that we leaned into parenthood, because it's taught me a lot and shaped me as a woman.
I have to give you a hug. This was my favorite conversation in so long.
Really?
Yes. Oh my
gosh. I
am
appreciate
so
you.
grateful.
Thank you so much.